Good morning, welcome to Rough Cut. Later today I'm probably going to see John Carter in the cinema, which I'm very much looking forward to, and quite possibly another film as well, but I'm less looking forward to that as I don't know what it might be. There's not a great deal out, I don't think, at the moment. So, the big news here is that a current film will actually be reviewed and on its way to you soon. So, in the meantime, what I'd like to do is talk about two directors, both called George, and the franchises that they built. It's funny how I've come to look at their work and their careers without going into a tremendous amount of detail. They are two people I very, very much respected for the work that they did. Their work means something very special to me, and it's come to mean something really quite different as time has gone on. So when I was younger, both the Star Wars and the Night of the Living Dead trilogies really did delight me, as few other things could. Films I'm talking about here. So, I mean, obviously Star Wars had the lightsabers, it had the Wookiees, it had Han Solo, and the Living Dead had zombies in a farmstead, zombies in a shopping centre, and zombies in a bunker. So the similarities are endless, really, between the two, and they're obvious for all to see. I'm not simply running with this premise because they're both called George. I'm not that unimaginative and lazy, obviously. Now, so Star Wars, to me, it didn't come properly unstuck until the second prequel, when I realised, oh, hang on a second, George, this isn't just a misstep, is it? This is the second ridiculous plot that we've seen. And bear in mind, it's a space opera. The credits to The Phantom Menace rolled, and, far, far away in a galaxy, long, long ago, blah, blah. They start talking about tax, and just stuffing the thing with prequel information that clearly we don't need. We're not going to see Star Wars to make sure that absolutely every plot hole is filled. We're going to be entertained and excited. So, by the time the second one came along, we still had terrible actors standing next to tremendous actors, and they all somehow looked pretty naff. And then you start to wonder at the man who gave Hayden Christensen a leading role, and I guess, shouting, "Cut!" and then presumably adding, "Don't worry, we'll get it in post-production." So, I recently made a couple of good friends watch the original trilogy back to back, and they'd never seen it before. They'd managed to avoid watching Star Wars all this time. They're very cynical, but I was very optimistic that the power of the Force would lure them in, and we'd be flying around in the Millennium Falcon with me necking as many Brewdogs as I could manage. Now, something I didn't expect happened. The first film didn't really engage anyone, so I said, don't worry, The Empire Strikes Back is the next one, and I confidently sat back and enjoyed another strong but tasty Scottish ale. We came to the plot twist. It came and went, you know the one I mean, and there was mild disinterest all round, and people playing Peggle until I complained, and before I knew it, I was playing Peggle with them. So the three films came and went, and yes, they are getting on now, but they simply aren't as magical or as wonderful as I remember them to be. My memory is lying to me, and sure, it's easier to hook in 5-year-old Chris than 29-year-old Chris. But looking at it through Brewdog eyes, what I saw wasn't what I remembered it to be. Something that frequently happens when I drink. So, having said that, the original Living Dead trilogy, it still stands up as a remarkable and classic piece of cinema. I stand by all three, including the much criticised third instalment. I think that it's fair to say the end of the world will be pretty bleak, and who's the real monster? Wink, wink. So Romeo suffers from not really having proper actors. He didn't really have them throughout the original three films, but ironically it's when he throws Dennis Hopper into the first modern one that he starts to have problems for me. With some really poor but attractive actors and actresses, rubbing shoulders with some really good ones, we start to notice the clunkers as they stand out more. I do also have a problem with Romeo's class war, which is now rubbing in our faces with all the subtlety of an A-level student and not the deft touch of the grandfather of a genre. Yes, we get it, George. Fiddler's Green is like America, and gas station attendants, for some reason, don't have the kind of respect and kudos that a self-made rich man get. For shame. So far, not too good. But in between all that, there was stuff that I really did like. Then I suppose George would have woken up from a nap and he remembered that he'd seen the Blair Witch Project. And he remembered it was made on a tiny budget and it won a ton of money. So George makes Diary of the Dead, and with this he jumps the shark. So now I recently enjoyed Chronicle in the cinema, which came out late last year. But the one thing about it I didn't like was the candid camera found footage angle. I thought it was completely unnecessary and just seemed so tacked on. However, at least it was all still well shot. You could actually see what the director is looking at. Now, Diary of the Dead takes a very weak plot, weak characters, catastrophic acting, and it's baffling direction from Romeo. He's got this idea, he's got this concept of a candid camera. He seems to have put no thought into the experience for the person watching the film. He really, for the viewer, absolutely bonkers. So, Lucas claims that he's now going to go back, after all this Star Wars stuff, he's going to go back and make indie films. Off the top of my mind, he made one indie film, and that was American Graffiti, and then he jumped ship to make blockbusters. But he won't go back to making indie films. What he'll do now is he'll retrofit all of the other Star Wars films into 3D, and then he'll modify them as technology changes. He can't seem to stop himself. Do you remember around about, I think it was about 2000, when the computer graphics happened and he got really excited and he felt almost he'd missed out on something, and he went in and digitally remastered these films. So he'll keep tinkering with them as time and time goes on. And presumably when he gets too old to get into an editing suite, because that's what he loves. He doesn't love directing. It's there for the viewer to see. He doesn't love directing. He doesn't love dealing with people, with actors. What he likes doing is editing. So anyway, he'll probably write his autobiography and then spend the rest of his days tinkering with it and re-releasing it as technology changes, as he gets excited about different things at various times. So for both Georges, I know that you can argue they suffer as film has moved on since their day in the 1960s and 70s. But you know what? The modern releases from both of them demonstrated virtually no understanding of why both sets of films touched a nerve and made such a difference to so many people. Watching an interview now, Romeo seems to have put his films together through a series of happy accidents rather than an excellent plan. So the hero of the first film, for example, was a black man, which caused quite a stir at the time. Well, out of the small bunch of actors that George could corral into being in the film, he just so happened to be the best actor. It just so happened that this guy was black. It was not a political message, or not intentionally at the very least. So there we are. A depressing look for me at two things that I loved and how they hurt me. Give it 12 months and I might be amending this blog to include a reboot of The Evil Dead, which will basically be a third remake of the first film. And then there's the other one, which people didn't like very much, except me. So what actually gives me hope for that actually is Drag Me to Hell, which came out a couple of years ago, and it was really, really enjoyable and showed a lot of understanding of why the original Evil Dead and, of course, Evil Dead 2 were good, which that fills me with hope, because from the two Georges, I don't get that feeling with their work. So, as mentioned, a review of John Carter is coming up shortly, and thank you ever so much for listening. This is what's called Rough Cut, and my name is Chris Thomas, as it always has been. Kind regards.